where those fog patches persist. Otherwise, bright skies for the western half of the UK, cloudier conditions in the east, but the rain tending to be light and on and off, nowhere near as heavy and persistent as it's been in places. A coldish afternoon compared to what we've seen recently, 11 or 12 Celsius in the south, 8 or 9 in the north. But for many, it's bright skies and largely dry until the evening, when some heavy and persistent rain pushes into Northern Ireland, reaching western Scotland, Wales and the southwest by midnight. That sweeps across the country, accompanied by coastal gales around parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's replaced by showers. And it's a milder night because of the breeze and the rain, but cold enough for some flakes of snow over the Scottish mountains, perhaps the Pennines as well, above around 400 or 500 metres. The rain pushes into the North Sea, blustery showers follow, some heavy downpours in the west, and that's how it looks on Sunday, a day of sunny spells, but also some of these lively downpours, a gusty breeze, and Monday, Tuesday sees more unsettled weather.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist entrepreneur Danny Kelly. It says nothing on there for him. He won't like that. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the government of locking the country into an economic doom loop. The comments follow the Chancellor's autumn statement yesterday. Meanwhile, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is warning the fall in living standards will be the largest since records began. Jeremy Hunt has defended his plans as the right thing to do, but Sir Keir says the fiscal measures will hurt the most vulnerable.
The government yesterday, having done huge damage to the economy, has gone after working people again with stealth taxes and council tax increases and done nothing about non-dom status, the super rich who are not paying their taxes in this country. And they've got no plan for growth, so they're locking us in a doom loop We would have put a plan for growth on the table that actually runs towards the challenges of tomorrow.
A sexual predator has admitted to the murder of law graduate Zara Alina, who was brutally kicked and stamped on, then left for dead. Jordan McSweeney also admitted to sexually assaulting Zara Alina as she walked home from a night out in East London last summer. The 35-year-old from Dagenham was found by passers-by with severe head injuries. She later died in hospital. McSweeney had only recently been released from prison and had targeted more than one woman before. Civil servants in the Home Office, Border Force, Department for Transport and DEFRA are to take industrial action in a dispute over pay. The PCS union has been calling for a 10% pay rise for its members, but this was rejected by the government. It's planning 1 month of what it calls sustained industrial action from mid-December, which will affect ports, borders and other areas of transport. Royal Mail workers have also announced a further series of strikes in the run-up to Christmas. The Communication Workers Union will walk out in 6 states in December, including Christmas Eve. That's in addition to the 4 days coming up over the next 2 weeks. Royal Mail has called the action damaging. The Football Supporters Association has criticised Qatar over its U-turn on alcohol. It comes after FIFA announced that beer will not be sold at the Islamic countries' World Cup stadiums. The FSA criticised the timing of the decision, which comes just 2 days before the tournament kicks off. Fans had previously been told they would be allowed to drink within the ticketed perimeter of each match venue. South Korea and the United States have held a joint air drill in response to North Korea's latest missile launch. The exercise included firing against targets simulating missile launches. A senior US government official said North Korea had fired a missile that can hit many countries around the world. Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the launch, calling it a brazen violation of multiple UN resolutions. A Swedish prosecutor has said damage to the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea in September was caused by an act of sabotage. Investigators have found traces of explosives at the site of the damaged gas pipelines linking Russia and Germany. Swedish and Danish authorities are investigating 4 holes on both Nord Stream 1 and 2 lines. Russia has claimed British Navy personnel were responsible, allegations the MOD denies. The Royal Air Force says it's found unacceptable behaviour in the Red Arrows after allegations of sexual assault, bullying and misogyny. The force said the investigation had found no criminal activity, but disciplinary action had been taken, including dismissals. It's thought more than 40 members of staff gave evidence to the inquiry. The team has since received training in unacceptable behaviour. The owner of a luxury hotel in Kent has told GB News he rejected a government offer to house asylum seekers because he wasn't prepared to make his staff redundant. In an exclusive interview, Richard Martin, who owns the Blazing Donkey Hotel near Sandwich, says he was offered over £1 million for a 1-year contract. He says he couldn't think of anything more absurd and didn't want to let down the community that relies on his venue for events. To help with the worsening cost of living crisis, the UK's biggest retailer is offering its staff advances on their pay. Under the Tesco scheme, around 280,000 workers can receive up to a quarter of their pay early. The supermarket chain says it'll help staff avoid having to take on expensive debt with high interest payments. Staff are allowed 1 advance per pay period at a fee of just under £1.50. Twitter has temporarily closed its offices amid a wave of staff resignations. The measure was reportedly prompted by fears disgruntled staff could sabotage the company. Hundreds of employees have believed to have quit after owner Elon Musk asked them to sign up for long hours at high intensity or leave. Musk has tweeted he isn't worried about the resignations because the best people, he says, are staying. Twitter says the offices will reopen on Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Taking the cash. Here we go again. Virtue signalling celebrities banging the drum against racism whilst taking the cash. The England football team are apparently holding talks, no, not about how they will tackle racism in the sport head on and what actions they'll take if it transpires. Oh, no. They're having talks over whether they will or won't take the knee at the Qatar World Cup before Monday's opening group game against Iran. So, alongside their rainbow-coloured laces or armbands or whatever it was they were going to do in support of LGBT rights, they're now spending, in my view, more time than discussing yet another virtue signal. And from what I can see, way more time on that than dealing directly with the problem itself. Gareth Southgate's players have so far taken the knee 35 consecutive games before the Nations League in September. And the Premier League, however, decided only to do this, in my view, empty gesture on high-profile matches. For goodness sake. Gareth Southgate has ignored the reaction of booing fans. He said that his group were more determined than ever to take the knee. Now, I don't believe in booing people if they want to do this, because booing is simply bad manners. But getting down on bended knee to remind people of how racist they are or how racist the world is, or to highlight the plight of racism, which doesn't really need highlighting because it's clear to see, whilst playing matches in countries whose human rights abuses are abhorrent, whilst also taking the cash, is frankly an insult. Surely the right thing to do would be to refuse to play, or for FIFA to refuse to have the big events like the World Cup in intolerant countries, or perhaps even to stop games where racist behaviour like throwing bananas onto the pitch or racist abuse is being chanted, and then to prosecute the people. The fans would sort out their behaviour pretty sharpish. But oh no, let's all bend down on one knee, show how much we care about racism. Let's all take the knee, and then let's take the cash. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, does this autumn statement benefit you? Chancellor Jeremy Hunt took to the Commons to deliver his autumn statement yesterday. He announced £24 billion of tax rises, whilst also introducing £30 billion worth of spending cuts. And that, says the Office for Budget Responsibility, or OBR, claimed that the country will enter a steep recession that will essentially erase 8 years of fiscal growth. So I'm asking, are any of these policies benefiting you? Then at 4:50, it's Inside Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky maintains that Kyiv wasn't responsible for the explosion in a Polish town, insisting that there was evidence of Russian traces in the blast. Now, that is despite NATO claiming it was likely a Ukrainian missile. I'll be joined by a political commentator later this hour. And at 5, it's this week's Friday Focus. In his autumn statement, Jeremy Hunt also announced that Suffolk, Cornwall, Norfolk and another regions of the North East are set to gain new so-called mayors as part of devolution deals across England. Now, that is as the Windsor report found that London Mayor Sadiq Khan failed to follow due process during ousting of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick. So I'm asking, is further devolution of power really the way forward? That's on the way in the next hour, as ever. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton and broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur, Adele Boyce type entrepreneur, Danny Kelly. Oi, dodging and diving, ducking a dibble. Hello, to you both.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice
It always reminds me of George Bush's wonderful remark. He was talking about the French and he said they don't even have a word for entrepreneur.
Very good, very good. I'll start with you, Christine. OK, taking the knee.
Well, they should not be there in the first place, in my view. OK, it's not their fault, but the fact that this, whatever it's called, is taking place in Qatar, to me, is absolute abomination. It has the most appalling human rights record, and somebody who went massively up in my estimation the other day was Peter Tatchell, who made a very, very brave stand. He went over and he held up, and he could have been in prison. Anything could have happened to him. He all right, and he came home. But, I mean, good for him. No, taking the knee, it is an empty gesture. Absolutely empty gesture. What does it mean now? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What's the name? You're the footy person. What's the name of the Chelsea player, Marcus
Rashford?
No, that's Man U. Marcus Rashford's Man U.
No, there's a Spanish player who plays for Chelsea. Anyway, he was one of the first ones who just refused to do it.
Was he a black geezer, black bloke?
Oh, I don't know
He's
what
got to be a white guy. Won't refuse to do it because Hillary's. No, he's got to be a brave man to stick his head above the parapet if you're white and you refuse to take the. Of course. And all of a sudden, they should have decided this last year with the whole Premier League because I'm not convinced. In fact, I would bet my house on the fact that it's as unpopular in the dressing room as it is amongst society. Why is society, it's 50-50, maybe 60-40, unpopular? So that surely is reflected in the dressing room. But you try and be a professional footballer, particularly a white lad, who's going to say, do you know what, I don't want to be associated with this Marxist group of people who want to defund the police, who don't want a nuclear family. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take the knee. If you're a white guy, you'll have the race card thrown at you.
Of course you will. If you say that, you're a racist, which is absurd.
Yeah. So what happens if you're a black person and you say it?
You can get away with it.
No, but seriously, I mean, look, this is, to me, an empty gesture. I don't...
Completely empty.
Racism is totally unacceptable. I call it out every time I see it, and I do things like I go to schools, I do lectures, I do motivational talks, I do something, I get off my feet, and I get off my knees and I do something, or I'll be on screen talking, you know, hopefully professionally, and people will look and say, hey, if they identify with me, they might think, well, I can do it too. That is just something that I would do because it's for me, and I want to build people up, whether they're black, white or whatever. But bending down on one knee to show that you are associated, affiliated with something, or you show empathy towards it, it's not good enough. Because you should do more. You shouldn't go.
What you're doing is positive. You're doing something positive to defeat racism in whatever form, exactly, to show people that you can do it, etc., etc. But it's a completely meaningless, frankly, this taking.
Gareth Southgate.
Just gesture politics.
Gareth Southgate should keep his mouth shut because it's a political issue. He really should keep his mouth shut. This should have been decided last year. The whole Premier League, all of the footballers should have had a secret ballot. Do we want to take the knee? Because the left-wing media portray all of these footballers, these multi-millionaire footballers, as very pro-BLM. BLM, we mustn't forget, and I mentioned this earlier, they're anti-capitalists, OK? So why would a multi-millionaire footballer follow the doctrine of an anti-capitalist? That's because they're forced to do so. There should have been a secret ballot. Yeah, because Gareth Southgate, he's a football manager, he's not a politician.
They do want to do it. Perhaps they do want to do it. You don't know.
Yeah, but you don't know that.
No, but neither
I think
do you.
if there had been a ballot, a secret ballot, we would have known about it, because that would have been democratic, and we would all have said, fine, if they want to do it, let them do it. But there's a feeling that they're all doing it because otherwise they'll be regarded as racist.
Well, I mean, there's also the comment that they say, well, we'd like to stay out of politics. Well, if you want to stay out of politics, don't take the knee, because you can't then say, oh, it's not fair, you're talking about us and you're going on about it, and we're playing at Qatar, but we're going to ignore all of that. If you're going to take the knee, then you have to also acknowledge the human rights abuses in Qatar and the treatment of LGBT people. And if you acknowledge those things, it would mean that you probably wouldn't go. But you're still going. They're still going. They're all taking the money, and yet they're bending down on one knee. That's not good enough.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think they should have been... 12 years ago, Qatar were awarded the World Cup. I don't think they should have been awarded the World Cup.
Of course they shouldn't have.
It's not the footballers' fault.
No, I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying...
Well, you're saying they shouldn't go.
No, I'm saying that if you're going to involve yourself in politics, then you must understand that when we involve you in politics, for example, you're going somewhere that is politically is not widely accepted. People don't really like the way they behave. If you're going to do that, then you'll be found as a hypocrite. There's no point. You can't say, you can't separate...
You can't call a footballer a hypocrite.
Nobody's blaming the football. It would be... I know they're vastly overpaid, but it would be one hell of a stand for a senior footballer, leading player. I have no idea who they are, but for one of them to say, I'm not going because of this. Now, it's Rod Stewart who said he wasn't going. Yeah. But he can do that. He's in a privileged position. But he's done it. Good for him.
If people did that, if people didn't play, if there was racism on the pitch and they just said, right, that's it, we're not playing, that's it, then things would change. If people said they refused to actually play the game, then something would happen. But they're not. They're going to go, they're going to take the money, then they're going to do a virtual
What they should do is walk out onto the pitch and then all just sit down and refuse to play.
That's what I would do.
In protest against the evil regime.
They've stopped selling beer.
Well, I think that's quite funny.
It's awful.
Go for that. If you just joined me, welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking you lots of things about the autumn statement. I'm wondering, did it benefit you at all? Now, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt took to the Commons to deliver his statement. He announced £24 billion worth of tax rises, £30 billion worth of cuts. That's as the OBR, Office for Budget Responsibility, claimed that the country will enter a steep recession. So I'm asking, are any of these policies benefiting you? Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. There is a poll up right now asking you that very question. Does this autumn statement benefit you? Cast your vote now. First, we'll come back after this.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. If you've just joined us, don't forget you can follow us live on YouTube, and you can even download the free GB News app now before the break. We were discussing whether we should be taking the knee or not, because the England football team have been discussing whether they will or they won't for the Qatar World Cup. Let's take a look at what you've been saying. Mike says the England and Premier League players should not take the knee. Keep social justice activism out of sport. Southgate has made football divisive. Ben says since England started taking the knee, they've lost more matches than they've won. Graham says taking the knee is a pointless gesture, especially in Qatar. It will mean nothing. Well, keep your thoughts coming. It's always good to hear what you think. But now it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, does this autumn statement benefit you at all? Yesterday, the Chancellor delivered his plans to get the economy back on track. And as he acknowledges, the UK is already in recession. Now, as part of his statement, Jeremy Hunt has reduced the threshold for the higher rate of income tax from £150,000 to just over £125,000. The state pension benefits and tax credits will rise in line with inflation by more than 10%. Millions of households will pay more in energy bills from April, the typical bill rising from £2,500 to £3,000 as the government reduces the level of support. And energy firms will be hit with an expanded windfall tax of 35%. That's up 10% from 25%. And the Chancellor has vowed to protect the poorest and believes his plan will help rebuild the economy. Labour were quick to criticise his autumn statement. Rachel Reeves said that the economic mess was as a result of 12 weeks of Conservative chaos and 12 years of Conservative economic failure. A reaction across the political spectrum was somewhat astonishing. Unsurprisingly, the Metro ran the story of "You've never had it so bad," whilst the Daily Mirror also described the statement as carnage. However, growing numbers of right-leaning papers also appeared to also be angry with the budget. The Daily Mail attacked the budget on how middle earners and strivers were slammed with tax hikes. And the Telegraph compared it to the rhetoric of Osborne with the policies of Gordon Brown. And while speaking to Dan Wootton yesterday, Professor Patrick Minford, who was one of Liz Truss's biggest backers on the high-growth mini-budget, called the autumn statement nonsense. He added,
"You tax people up to the eyeballs, they're going to demand higher wages, which will actually make inflation worse. And anyway, the inflation's going to come down of its own because commodity prices are reversing now. So, you know, all the sort of reasons they're giving are nonsense. And what they're doing is, on the basis of very bad reasoning, they're hitting the economy really hard when they ought to be supporting it."
So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, does the autumn statement benefit you? Well, I'm joined now by the CEO of Competere and international trade advisor Shankar Singham. OK, Shankar, so the budget, it didn't look great. What is your view on it? Was it the right thing? Are they going the right way?
So I think they would argue this is a fiscal statement and it's intended to ensure the fiscal house is in order. My concern here is that there's a danger that you sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater, and because of the market's reaction to the mini budget, that what we're seeing now is very much back to the old orthodoxy of the only levers you can really pull are austerity, cuts in public sector spending, or tax rises, and that's really all you have. And unfortunately, the problem is that that's not the problem with the UK economy. The problem with the UK economy over the long term has been a lack of growth, and therefore what the levers you should be pulling are the levers that generate economic activity, and that is principally regulatory reform. To some extent, you want to do something about the tax burden, which is that it's incredibly high in the UK. And if you make it higher, if you make it worse for people, then I have some sympathy for what you just played in Patrick Minford's statement, that you're just going to discourage investment in the UK, and you're going to discourage people from coming to the UK, and you're going to encourage people leaving the UK and going to places where they're not facing such a high tax rate and so on. So I hope that they're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I hope we are going to now see some concrete regulatory reform proposals that lower the costs, that make things cheaper for people, that are focused on growing the economy and creating economic activity. But I have to say that we haven't seen very much sign of that at the moment.
They've also got the fuel duty rises. I mean, what does that ultimately mean? It seems like they're literally going to just jump up the price quite quickly for next March and April.
Yeah, well, they've said it's not government policy to do that, but there has been some reporting of that potential increase in April. And again, it's the same sort of thinking, which is the way we solve this problem is to increase the sort of static revenues that come into the Treasury without recognising that actually it's dynamic growth that generates far more revenue to the Treasury. I think I said to you, Nana, in a previous interview, that one of my colleagues is Rob Portman, who is the former head of the Office of Management and Budget in the US, and he would say that once you see the effect of growth on the economy, sort of seas of red ink are washed away, and you see the massive impact of even very small amounts of growth on the economy. So, I think they're operating with a very restricted toolbox on all of this. It's a fiscal macroeconomic toolbox, and they're ignoring the very real microeconomic levers that they actually do have. But reform is difficult, and you need to plan for it. And I think Liz Truss discovered that if you don't plan for it well, then you'll be sort of besieged by those who don't want reform, and that will be extremely damaging for you. So there's not much time left to do a lot of this. the UK left the EU with the deal back in 2020. There's a lot we could have done between then and now, and we haven't really done any of it.
Well, we seem to be following, as you said, the same old orthodoxy. Stay right there, because I'm also joined by former Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. OK, Dennis, is the autumn statement good news or bad news? What do you think?
It's certainly good news, I think, for Labour on the whole. But Jeremy Hunt overnight to take 2.6 million people who aren't paying tax now and make them taxpayers to pay for some of Sunak's weird management. It's very techie stuff, this, of Treasury finances. But overall, just a broad failure of the last 10 years of austerity. I think, we're coming up to that time for a change moment in politics, irrespective of the qualities of Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, when Labour probably is going to be the largest party in the next election. And certainly this helps. We'll just read all the papers this morning. I mean, the Tory...
But what would Labour have done differently? Because Labour, I mean, they signed off all the things, so they were all for Liz Truss's ideas, apart from obviously the high rate tax. Then they've been following and agreeing to a lot of this anyway. So what would they do differently?
No. Am I on the Labour front?
No, but I'm just wondering what
shadow cabinet. Well, I would not have started, as Paul Thompson of the Institute of Fiscal Studies made clear. The first big mistake was George Osborne imposing austerity, which stopped British growth, not quite dead, but compared to the rest of Europe, very fast. There's a second point which Labour can't discuss.
Well, listen, we'll carry on with that second point, but I'm going to come back to Shankar very briefly. Shankar, OK, so instead of what was done, because you talked about the fact that obviously they're using the same old Treasury orthodoxy, how could we potentially get out of this? Because they didn't do anything for people with mortgages either, so there was nothing there. So there doesn't seem to be anything there for anyone.
No, and I think the first thing you need to do is diagnose why we're in this situation in the first place, because I think the sort of playbook that they seem to be pulling out is the playbook of the sort of post-global financial crisis where we were also coming out of a deep global slowdown and recession. But the reasons why we're in this place are very different from those. Obviously, you don't shut the global economy down in the way that we have done for 2 years. And print vast amounts of money, 500 billion on COVID recovery, and expect nothing to happen. I mean, it was pretty clear that we were going to be hitting a big global recession as a result of this, and many of us have been talking about this for quite some time. So if you know that that is the problem, that's the reason you're in this mess, you need to focus on generating private sector economic activity again, because you've actually, it's government intervention that has slowed that activity. It's not because there was some kind of slowdown in the business cycle or something of that nature. So I think you need to figure out what are the tools in my toolbox that are going to stimulate that kind of economic activity and growth. And it really is about generating more competition in the UK market and regulatory reform.
OK, well, let me come back to Dennis, because Dennis, you alluded to the papers all being pretty much, as I've read them, none of them are in support of it at all. There doesn't seem to be much going for it. I'm trying to find some positive in it. Do you see any positive in it, apart from the fact that it's so bad that it means Labour may well push ahead?
Let's leave that to one side. It's kind of hard. I mean, one thing that disappoints me is somebody stole my car, sort of boring old diesel Peugeot 4 or 5 years ago, and I decided that was a sign from up above that I should go green. So I haven't had a car for 4 or 5 years, but I'm thinking of getting one. Natural turn is to get an electric vehicle, and he's just put road tax on it. So that just discourages everybody who might think of saying, right, I'll make my little contribution to global warming, I'll go electric. I just don't understand it completely. But they walk in terror of their own backbenchers. I don't want to open a debate, but you could unlock competitive trade tomorrow if you started competing with Europe. But 70% of all our small, medium enterprises have simply stopped trading with Europe because of the Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak red tape. That is a deregulatory measure that could really kickstart the economy.
Why don't they do that, though? I mean, let's bring Shankar back in. I mean, why don't they get rid of the red tape? Isn't that what Liz Truss wanted to do? But, of course, they got rid of her because she didn't quite sing from the right song sheet. I mean, why have they not done that, Shankar?
Well, Dennis makes an interesting point that I want to just focus on, which is the barriers that are faced by British business and by the UK to Europe. And actually, I mean, there are reasons for this. So you know, if the UK people voted to leave the EU, then you need to deliver on that in the way that minimises the damage and the disruptions, which are the barriers that Dennis was referring to, and you need to maximise the opportunities. You've got to do both of those things at the same time. So that is why you have the trade policy agenda. There's a lot of trade deals that we've been able to do that we would not have been able to do inside the EU because of the baggage the EU brings to the table. The EU has taken 20 years to do deals with Mercosur, with India and so forth. They still don't have one with many of these countries. So the UK has some opportunities there, and it needs to minimise the disruptions. That's border management, which we need to really push on. And we also need to agree with the EU. And the problem we have here is we need to take the trade agreement that we have, and it has to be a trade agreement in order for you to have these other advantages and regulatory reform that you're able to put in. And you need to then talk to the EU about, you know, deepening that trade agreement, which we do with all of our trading partners, every trading partner.
Well, let me bring Dennis in for sort of a last word, because we haven't got much time left, so I want to bring Dennis in.
Well, I really don't want to turn this into Brexit. Honestly, we're not here for that. But as George Eustice, I used to debate with him. He was a UKIP guy, then he became a Tory MP. A minister said the Australia trade deal is a disaster for British farmers. So Liz Truss panicking, saying, I want to sign trade deals, signed away the shop. We need a tougher approach. We also need a friendly approach. And we've had 6 or 7 years of all our press and Boris Johnson sneering at Macron, sneering at Europe. Let's calm that down and see what we might be able to work out. And let some more export and trade. Trade throughout British history is what increases wealth. We cut the trade to Europe.
Well, that's exactly. We know that trade increases wealth, but high taxes, I don't think they do. Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, thank you so much. And Shankar Singham, CEO of Competare and International Trade Advisor, thank you so much. If you just joined me, just fast approaching 34 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. Now, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, does this autumn statement benefit you? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Stay with me because at 5 it's time for Friday Focus, and the Chancellor has forwarded his proposal to give certain areas in England mayors. That's as the Windsor report found that London Mayor Sadiq Khan failed to follow due process for ousting former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick. So I'm asking, is further devolution of power really the way forward? That's all after your latest news headlines.
It's 4:34. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the government of locking the country into an economic doom loop. The comments follow the Chancellor's autumn statement yesterday. Meanwhile, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is warning the fall in living standards will be the largest since records began. Jeremy Hunt has defended his plans as the right thing to do. A sexual predator has admitted to the murder of law graduate Zara Alina, who was brutally kicked and stamped on, then left for dead. Jordan McSweeney also admitted to sexually assaulting the law graduate as she walked home from a night out in East London last summer. The 35-year-old from Dagenham was found by passers-by with severe head injuries. She later died in hospital. Civil servants in the Home Office, Border Force, Department for Transport and DEFRA are to take industrial action in a dispute over pay. The PCS union has been calling for a 10% pay rise for its members, but this was rejected by the government. No dates have been announced yet, but it's thought the action will impact ports, borders and all areas of transport. The Royal Air Force says it's found unacceptable behaviour in the Red Arrows after allegations of sexual assault, bullying and misogyny. The force said the investigation had found no criminal activity, but disciplinary action had been taken, including dismissals. It's thought more than 40 members of staff gave evidence at the inquiry. The team has since received training in unacceptable behaviour. The Football Supporters Association has criticised Qatar over its late U-turn on alcohol. FIFA announced that beer will not be sold as at the Islamic country's World Cup stadiums, just 2 days before the tournament kicks off. Fans had previously been told they would be allowed to drink alcohol within the ticketed perimeter of each match venue. TV online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's just fast approaching 40 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, does this autumn statement benefit you? Now, yesterday, the Chancellor delivered his plans to get the economy back on track as he acknowledges that the UK is already in a recession, and that is part of this autumn statement. Now, as part of the statement, Jeremy Hunt has reduced the threshold for the higher rate of income tax from £150,000 to £125,000. The state pension benefits and tax credits will rise in line with inflation by more than 10%. Millions of households will pay more in energy bills from April, the typical bill rising from £2,500 to £3,000 as the government reduces the level of support. And energy firms will be hit with an expanded windfall tax of 35%. That's up 10%. And the Chancellor has vowed to protect the poorest and believes his plan will help rebuild the economy. So reaction across the political spectrum is somewhat astonishing. Unsurprisingly, the Metro ran the story of "You've never had it so bad," whilst the Daily Mirror, again sort of a left-leaning press, also described the statement as carnage. However, a growing number of right-leaning papers also appeared to be angry with the budget. Take the Daily Mail, for example. It attacked the budget on how middle earners are. Strivers were slammed with tax hikes. And then, of course, the Telegraph, which compared it to the rhetoric of Osborne with the policies of Gordon Brown. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, does the autumn statement benefit you? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur, probably a lot worse off now, Danny Kelly.
It's real. I've just read the story. I am worse off.
Start with, go on then.
Well,
why is that?
OK, so...
Small businessman, of course you are.
I am a VAT-registered limited company.
Yeah.
And I've just read the devastating news that the dividend... Now, my account, I don't understand how it works.
No, don't worry.
I pay someone to look after my finances.
Yeah.
And everything is above board, no evasion, no avoidance.
Yeah. Get on with it.
So I've just discovered that my dividend allowance will be cut from 2,000 to 1,000 next year. And then in 2024, it will be 500. So I think how this works, limited companies... I have a big turnover, well in excess of the £85,000 threshold. And so after my turnover and my profit, because I'm a used car dealer, then there's a certain amount...
Pre-loved cars.
Pre-loved cars. There's a certain amount that I can, as a director of a company, I can pay myself, and I think it's tax-free. So let's just say there's $2,000, a dividend. Well, that's good. I think it's tax-free, I'm not sure. Or it's taxed... at a lower level. Well, I'm not an accountant.
Just get on with the story. Give us the story.
So basically, that benefit is going to be halved next year, and then you'll be glad to know
we'll work that out.
The year after that's going to be halved again.
So you'll be
I will be earning.
Businessman.
I will be an extra large businessman, but with smaller profits. I think that's how it works. I'll have to speak. You should get an accountant on.
I think that's how it works. Christy.
You should get an accountant on.
Well, it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. I mean, let's look at the positive side. I am a pensioner, so thank you very much. My state pension will go up, but let's look at it. It didn't go up last year, so we're playing catch-up, so that's no big deal. No, I'm sure I should be vastly worse off with all the energy prices going up. The Chancellor actually said, and I'm going to read it to get it right, he said, Conservatives know that high-tax economies damage enterprise and erode freedom.
Yes.
How can he say that and then do the exact opposite? In 55 days, we have gone from Liz Truss's 30 billion tax cuts to Hunt's 30 billion tax rises. I mean, it's the most deeply un-Tory budget imaginable. And the other thing I read recently, this morning, was that electricity consumption, which is a pretty good yardstick of how society is doing, has gone down by 20% since 2005. Now, I find that quite extraordinary. If the economy is booming and throbbing, etc., etc.
Throbbing economy?
Yes.
The electrical consumption has gone
down by 20%. That means people like you're not using machines, this, that, and
maybe that's because machinery is more effective. Technology reduces power consumption.
That may be it, but it's supposed to be one of the indicators of whether the economy is booming. But I mean, it is the most extraordinary budget for a Tory Chancellor to bring in.
They had
I mean,
no choice.
I'll tell you what really horrified me.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually Hunt, but what you can hardly tell the difference between Hunt and Sunak. They're both globalist glove puppets. There was Sunak sitting with Trudeau.
Yeah.
Hello, Volodymyr. It's Justin and Rishi here.
I saw
Did you
that.
see
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I
it
saw
was
that.
sick-making. Did you not see it?
Vladimir.
Volodymyr. They were sending a message to Volodymyr
Zelensky.
And I promise you, they were sitting there like a couple of sixth formers. Hello, Volodymyr. You know, it's Rishi and
I just don't think they understand the reality of what they're putting on us. I think what they live in is a bubble where, oh, it's OK, you'll be fine, everything will be fine. I would like them, and this is actually, Rishi, if you're watching, I would like you to live in the shoes of somebody, not your Pradas, but in the shoes of somebody who actually lives and works in that middle class. And I'd like to see if you could live on what you've just put forward to everybody. And the fact that they want to sort of go electric as well, with electric cars, and they're talking about the charging points. I just don't understand why they don't realise. Oh, Jeremy was saying, oh, there's money now, there'll be more charging points and blah, blah, blah. And obviously he's going to bring in the, obviously, vehicle excise duty now for people with electric cars in 2020. And it's like, does he not understand that if they're going to stop the production of diesel and petrol cars by 2030, I think it is, then they're expecting us to be able to afford and buy electric cars. Which none of us have no money. We haven't got any money after this.
That's not the case. They're not... No, they're stopping selling brand new petrol or electric cars.
No, you can still
so
have a second.
Quality,
you'll be all right.
Used cars are still going to be available in diesel and petroleum.
But
don't
that's
worry.
not the point. But why should we have to be going that way? I'll be needing a new car soon. Bless my little Citroen C1. It's done 170,000 miles. Quentin Wilson said it was some sort of miracle that it's done that, but it's amazing, right? It's done that. I bought it from just kind of new.
Brilliant.
And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to get another car at some point. I don't want an electric one. I don't want an electric car.
You want to buy a big Land Rover off me, don't you? That's what you said to me off air. Range Rover. And I've got one for sale, 11 grand. Beautiful.
No,
it's just gorgeous.
It's not a selling shop here, Danny. Really?
Yes, it's that good.
It seems to me that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have delivered some sort of medieval health treatment to the economy, like leeches and bleeding, whereas in fact what they should be doing is giving small businesses, I mean, it's the lifeblood of this country, are people like Danny, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. They should be giving them the fresh air of free enterprise, not taxing them up to the hilt. I mean, our borrowing is costing, whatever it is, I've written it down, £500 million a day. Now, that is absolutely dead money. It's money we could be spending on all sorts of other things. It's mind-blowing. And what about HS2? Let's the great big elephant in the room. We're still not scrapping HS2.
You call me an elephant.
Well, that's a blue elephant. Anyway, this show is nothing without you.
Blue anymore.
And let's welcome our great British voice onto the show. Your chance to tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. What should we head over to this hour?
The Northwest.
Should we go to Bolton?
Greater Manchester.
Let's go to Bolton. Let's speak to Jess Gill, our GB News voice. Hello, Jess. Thank you so much for joining us. Right. So, first of all, has the budget benefited you in any way, shape, or form?
No, absolutely not. As a young person, I feel completely betrayed by this budget because it's, quite frankly, a budget for the boomers. I think when we talk about this budget with this statement, it's taking money away from the hard-working young people of this nation and giving it to handouts for pensioners. We have the highest tax burden of 70 years. It's estimated that we'll be 7% poorer in 2025, and it leaves young people penniless, houseless and childless. Meanwhile, we have to foot the bill for boomers who receive triple-up pensions, more NHS spending, and a load of other benefits. Why is this fair? Why is this handouts fair? When considering 1 in 4 pensioners are millionaires, I don't think that's fair.
No, it isn't fair at all. And he never mentioned anything about mortgages either, as to young people getting on the housing ladder. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's not a reality for most young people. They don't consider having a house. We can't even afford rent, never mind saving up for another house. And no matter how many Netflix subscriptions we have to cancel, it's not going to change that.
Well, listen, Jess, thank you so much for your contribution. That's Jess Gill. She's our great British voice. She's a first-timer as well. Thank you, Jess. Nicely done. Well, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Christina says we pay the tax, but we never get the benefits. The statement better benefit us. It's true, isn't it? The middle class always pay the taxes. They never get anything out of it. Gordon says, delivered by 2 blokes no one voted for. I can't see them lasting for 2 more years with these policies and council tax.
Council tax.
2 very rich blokes, I might add. 2 multi-millionaires, one almost a billionaire. Tony says, I'm very glad that people who use electric cars have to pay tax.
Me too.
There's a lot of smug people out there paying this. Look at me, it's so much better than you.
They're less smug, aren't they?
They use the roads just as much. They create the potholes. Of course they should pay.
But road tax isn't about mending the roads. It's a central tax going to the government. Some of which goes on the roads.
Some of it.
Some of it, yes. Well, they'll be paying road tax anyway. It's
brilliant. Yeah, I'm made up. Yeah.
Well, you know, that was always going to happen. It's always on the cards, but sooner than they thought. Now you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. This is GB News Live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's inside Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky maintains Kyiv wasn't responsible for the explosion in a Polish town that killed 2 people, insisting that there was evidence of Russian traces in the blast, whilst NATO claims it was likely a Ukrainian missile. I'll be joined by a political commentator. That is on the way after this break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now it's time for Inside Ukraine, where we give you all the latest from the Russian conflict. NATO have claimed that the missile that landed in Poland was likely a Ukrainian weapon, despite Vladimir Zelensky asserting that there were Russian traces in the blast. I'm joined now in the studio by political correspondent Danny Armstrong. Danny, talk to me about this missile strike and NATO, because NATO are sort of corroborating the concept that actually it was a Ukrainian missile.
Well, yeah, this week we've seen the fourth and fifth waves of bombing by Russia in Ukraine. The fourth was the largest since the start of the war. That was on Tuesday. That was when the missile landed or exploded in the village of Przewodów in Poland, which is around about 4 miles over the border from Ukraine. Now, initially it was reported that it was a Russian missile. Later inspection and analysis of the fragments of the exploded missile have found that it is probably a S-300 defense missile fired by Ukraine. Now,
but how do they know that, though? Because they've said that they're traces of Russian missile. So how do they know that?
Well, there may be a little bit of confusion. It was built in the 1970s, of course, when everything was together in the Soviet Union. There could be some confusion over that. Let's make no mistake about it. If there wasn't Russia's invasion into Ukraine, this never would have happened.
It's their fault.
Of course, that's without question. The question is whether there was intent for Russia to endanger the safety of a NATO member state, and that has kind of been, it hasn't been proven, for one, and it doesn't look likely because...
well, they don't want it. Could it potentially be, because to me, I look at it, potentially a cover-up, because NATO don't particularly want... nobody wants World War III. Poland don't want World War III. We all want to believe that that would have been an accident, but irrespective of whether it is, I remember them very clearly saying that if any of those missiles set any foot on any part of NATO's soil, that there will be consequences. There should be consequences.
That's very true. Now, NATO have always been very aware of those red lines for Russia. The red lines, one of the main reasons why there was an invasion is because NATO couldn't confirm that Ukraine or Georgia wouldn't join the alliance. Now, this, of course, would be a huge red line if it was an intended attack on a NATO member state. The reason why I don't think it is because it was Article 5 that would be invoked, which means that if there is an attack on a NATO member state, then the NATO members can retaliate. Now, that would have triggered World War III, whereas there is the Article 4, which means there would be a diplomatic solution.
Would it have triggered World War III, or would it have stopped Vladimir Putin in his tracks? Because I think the narrative is that, it'll trigger World War III, I don't think that Vladimir Putin has the gall to do that. I think that if an element of Russian soil was damaged as a response to this, I think he would have to think twice about what he's doing, because he was warned.
Yes, and that's entirely true, and I entirely agree, because I've said many times on this programme, Nana, that the threat of nuclear war benefits Vladimir Putin especially, and everybody involved, anybody who has nuclear warheads, than actual nuclear war. Now, Article 4, which could have been invoked and which Poland was ready to invoke, would have seen just a diplomatic solution. It would have been a concern for the security of a NATO member state, and we could have had just a sit down and a talk about it, but there was nothing of that.
We could have seriously said, look, you need to back off now after that, get out of there, otherwise we're coming for you. If we'd said something, back out of Ukraine, we want you out within this time. If you're not there, then we will start working on some bits limits of your own country.
Well, that's true, but we means NATO, and NATO, of course, as we know, they talk tough, but they never come through.
Is there any point then to NATO, if we look at it, when it actually comes down to it? When it comes down to the wire, there's an issue. One of the NATO members two people died in Poland as a result of Vladimir Putin's assault on Ukraine, irrespective of whether it was a shell from a Russian or Ukrainian weapon. The fact is that it would never have happened had he not had that huge barrage bombardment on Ukraine, surely.
No, that is very true. However, if we come back to the Article 5, the only time that it's ever been invoked in the history of it having been, part of NATO's constitution is after 9/11. Now, of course, 2 Polish citizens dying in a village, of course, it's tragic, but it's never going to invoke Article 5, and it wouldn't have triggered World War III. Now, whether there's a point to NATO or not, that's another question.
Right, well, I'm joined now by Ukrainian MP Kira Radek. Kira, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Kira, tell us a bit about this missile strike on Poland.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Well, indeed, it's very hard to comment right now because the investigations are in order, and there are teams from NATO countries, including Ukrainian experts, who are working to figure out what happened. We, of course, send our condolences to 2 Polish farmers who were killed by the rocket, because Poland is one of our strongest allies in this war. However, I want to make sure that everybody understands that no matter what the investigation shows, the result something that happened is a result of Russian attack on our cities. And this is critically important to remember that the best output of this and the best reaction from NATO is not even invoking Charter 4 or Charter 5 or something else that people were saying, but to do the thing that we have been asking for a while: give us additional Air Force protection systems. Because if we have enough of those systems, we will be able to prevent Russian missiles hitting our cities, our homes, but also we will be able to prevent potential incidents like the one that happened with Poland. So no matter what was there, additional Air Force protection systems will allow us to stop something like this.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. And nobody's really talking about doing that. And perhaps the powers that be, if they're listening, could actually listen to what you're saying and assist you. I don't see what the downside of that would be. Why is it that they're not giving you these things?
You see, the issue is that since the beginning of the war, though, everybody was super supportive to us, and but the supplies of the weapons is coming usually very late. So between the statement that the politician is making that somebody is supporting Ukraine and time when the weapons actually arrive to our soldiers, to our army, it could take like 3-4 months. And still, on 9th month of war, Western allies are reactive to Putin, not proactive. So, for example, after these terrible missile hits on Ukraine that happened during the last couple of weeks, President Biden went forward and said that they are giving us additional Air Force protection systems. But it is a little bit too late. As of right now, 50% of our infrastructure is destroyed, which means that basically large cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, they are out of electricity for weeks right now. Smaller cities as well, and there is no running water because it depends on electricity. And there was first snow in Kyiv yesterday, so we are basically hitting the winter right now, and the heating situation is also dire.
Something needs to be done, Kira. You know, hopefully the powers that be will be listening and be getting on with protecting Ukraine, because this cannot continue. Kira Radek, thank you so much. Kira Radek, she's a Ukrainian MP, and also Danny Armstrong for joining me. You're with me. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Now, coming up in Friday Focus, we'll be shining a spotlight on the Chancellor's devolution deals. That's all with regard to the new mayors across the UK. And for the Great British Debate this hour, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? That's on the way after your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the government of locking the country into an economic doom loop. The comments follow the Chancellor's autumn statement yesterday. Meanwhile, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is warning the fall in living standards will be the largest since records began. Jeremy Hunt has defended his plans as the right thing to do. But Sir Keir says the fiscal measures will hurt the most vulnerable.
The government yesterday, having done huge damage to the economy, has gone after working people again with stealth taxes and council tax increases and done nothing about non-dom status, the super rich who are not paying their taxes in this country. And they've got no plan for growth, so they're locking us in a doom loop. We would have put a plan for growth on the table that actually runs towards the challenges of tomorrow.
A sexual predator has admitted to the murder of law graduate Zara Elena, who was brutally kicked and stamped on, then left for dead. Jordan McSweeney also admitted to sexually assaulting Zara Elena as she walked home from a night out in East London last summer. The 35-year-old from Dagenham was found by passers-by with severe head injuries. She later died in hospital. McSweeney had only recently been released from prison and had targeted more than one woman before. Detective Chief Inspector Dave Wellams says the Met Police are committed to tackling violence against women.
Jordan McSweeney has pleaded guilty today to the most serious offences. He is clearly a very dangerous individual, and his guilty plea today means that he is certain to serve a considerable period of time behind bars.
Civil servants in the Home Office, Border Force, Department for Transport and DEFRA are to take industrial action in a dispute over pay. The PCS union has been calling for a 10% pay rise for its members, but this was rejected by the government. It's planning 1 month of what it calls sustained industrial action from mid-December, which will affect ports, borders and other areas of transport. Royal Mail workers have also announced a further series of strikes in the run-up to Christmas. The Communication Workers Union will walk out on 6 dates in December, including Christmas Eve. That's in addition to the 4 days coming up over the next 2 weeks. Royal Mail has called the action damaging. The Football Supporters Association has criticised Qatar over its U-turn on alcohol. It comes after FIFA announced that beer will not be sold at the Islamic country's World Cup stadiums. The FSA criticised the timing of the decision, which comes just 2 days before the tournament kicks off. Fans had previously been told they would be allowed to drink within the ticketed perimeter of each match venue. South Korea and the United States have held a joint air drill in response to North Korea's latest missile launch. The exercise included firing against targets simulating missile launches. A senior US government official said North Korea had fired a missile that can hit many countries around the world. Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the launch, calling it a brazen violation of multiple UN resolutions. A Swedish prosecutor has said damage to the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea in September was caused by an act of sabotage. Investigators have found traces of explosives at the site of the damaged gas pipelines linking Russia and Germany. Swedish and Danish authorities are investigating 4 holes on both Nord Stream 1 and 2 lines. Russia has claimed British Navy personnel were responsible, allegations the MOD denies. The Royal Air Force says it's found unacceptable behaviour in the Red Arrows after allegations of sexual assault, bullying and misogyny. The force said the investigation had found no criminal activity, but disciplinary action had been taken, including dismissals. It's thought more than 40 members of staff gave evidence at the inquiry. The team has since received training in unacceptable behaviour. The owner of a luxury hotel in Kent has told GB News he rejected a government offer to house asylum seekers because he wasn't prepared to make his staff redundant. In an exclusive interview, Richard Martin, who owns the Blazing Donkey Hotel near Sandwich, said he was offered over £1 million for a one-year contract. He said he couldn't think of anything more absurd and didn't want to let down his community that relies on his venue for events. To help with the worsening cost of living crisis, the UK's biggest retailer is offering its staff advances on their pay. Under the Tesco scheme, around 280,000 workers can receive up to a quarter of their pay early. The supermarket chain says it'll help staff avoid having to take on expensive debt with high interest payments. Staff are allowed one advance per pay period at a fee of just under £1.50. Twitter has temporarily closed its offices amid a wave of staff resignations. The measure was reportedly prompted by fears disgruntled staff could sabotage the company. Hundreds of employees are believed to have quit after owner Elon Musk asked them to sign up for long hours at high intensity or leave. Musk has tweeted he isn't worried about the resignations because the best people, he says, are staying. Twitter says the offices will reopen on Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster, journalist and entrepreneur Danny Kelly. Still to come. Each Friday at 5, I put the spotlight on a particular guest or subject matter in Friday Focus. And this week, I'm looking at the autumn statement and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's announcement that Suffolk, Cornwall, Norfolk and another region of the North East are set to gain so-called new mayors as part of their devolution deals across England. And that is as the Windsor report found that the London Mayor Sadiq Khan failed to follow due process for ousting former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Cressida Dick. So I'm asking, is further devolution of power really the way forward? Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, we're looking at the migrant situation and asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? The country's top civil servant visited the border force facilities in Dover amid the ongoing migrant crisis, and that's as over 41,000 have reached British shores this year, also raising questions over where to house them. One owner of a luxury hotel in Kent rejected a £1.1 million government offer to house asylum seekers for a year. So I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Email me your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. So on today's Friday Focus, is further devolution of power really the way forward? Was the budget a nightmare? Sorry, you see what I did with that? Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced that Suffolk, Norfolk, Cornwall and another region of the North East will get new mayors as part of devolution deals across the country. Now, this means that England will be governed by them, and this follows the success of what the Chancellor described as the brilliant Tory mayors of Teesside and the West Midlands. Mayors were introduced by Labour as part of their devolution policy when they were in government. And whilst Jeremy praised these mayors, one mayor wasn't having such a great time. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who came under fire from the findings of Sir Tom Windsor's report in the former Met Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick's exit. Now, the report found that Sadiq Khan did not follow due process. Sadiq disputed the report at the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee after he claimed that it was biased. Windsor called his comment absurd. So on today's Friday Focus, I'm asking, is further devolution of power really the way forward? Is Jeremy Hunt's plan a nightmare? Sorry, I couldn't help that. Right, so our GB News political reporter Olivia Utley was in Suffolk earlier today looking at the reaction to the further devolution plans.
Plans for devolution in counties like Suffolk and Norfolk have been in the works for a while now, But there have been strenuous opposition from local council leaders in these areas who are worried about their own powers being diluted. So what's happened now is the government in Westminster has come up with a compromise with the local council leaders, whereby they'll change the rules, and instead of imposing a directly elected mayor, as we have in London or in Teesside, upon Suffolk and Norfolk, they will have a directly elected local council leader. Of course, some would argue that this amounts to pretty much the same thing, but the worry among opposition party leaders and local residents is that it won't be clear who the people in Suffolk should turn to if they have a problem. Is it their locally elected councillor, or is it their directly elected council leader, who of course may be from completely different parties? The reaction I've been getting on the ground here is that, yes, people are keen, in theory, on more devolution for Suffolk, but they're very worried that what the plan will mean is that their council tax will end up going up. Jeremy Hunt has said in the budget yesterday that council leaders can now raise council tax by up to 5% without going through a referendum, meaning that those who have properties in council band tax D could see their taxes rising by up to £250 per year. So yes, devolution is popular in theory, but when the money comes out of people's wallets, it's hard to know how they'll react.
Thanks. That is Olivia Utley. And yeah, when the money comes out of people's pockets, it's coming out of our pockets left, right and centre. So on today's Friday Focus, I'm asking, is further devolution of power really the way forward? Is Jeremy Hunt's plan A, I won't do it again, a nightmare? Right, I can't resist. But I'm joined by Deputy Chair of the London Assembly, Keith Prince. Keith, thank you very much for joining me.
Good morning.
OK, so I'm going to start with you, Keith, and also Stephen Pound as well. Thank you very much for joining me as well.
My pleasure.
All right, so I'm going to start with you, Keith, because this is... talk to me very briefly about what a mayor's meant to do.
Well, a mayor really is someone who can take a more strategic approach with the smaller elected bodies. Quite often in London, before we had the mayor, we just couldn't get the big projects through. Crossrail would be a classic example.
So the mayor would look after or come up with the idea of it? I mean, I remember, what's his name? Boris Johnson, how could I forget? He had that wonderful garden bridge. So these ideas will come from the mayor, they'll try and get the... Well,
that wasn't his idea, actually, but yes, the strategic approach and the strategic projects can come from the mayor's office or anywhere else, but you need a mayor to drive it through, because in London we have 32 councils plus the City of London, and to get them to agree anything is almost impossible. That is a nightmare, I can tell you, having been both sides of the fence.
But isn't that like so many layers of power that it just gets a bit complicated and a bit messy?
Well, that's why it's good to have the local authorities to do the local stuff, but then you need another body, a strategic body, to do the strategic stuff. And let's face it, the government are not good at doing that regional strategic stuff, so it's better you've got somebody in place to do that.
But then what if the person in place becomes a little bit too big for the boots? So, for example, with regards to people like Sadiq Khan, with the situation that happened with Cressida Dick, where they may potentially go beyond their powers?
Well, that is the problem, and I am in favour of strategic or regional mayors, but not if we stick to the model that we have in London, which doesn't work.
Is that the same model in other places like Manchester?
No, there are other models where they use the leaders of the councils to form the assembly. So it depends which model you choose, but the model in London should work, but because there are limited powers for the Assembly, it doesn't work.
But what is the point, Stephen? What is the point of all of this? So why do we want more mayors and more layers of bureaucracy?
Yeah. Well, it's two things. One is, let's go back to 1891.
Oh, God.
Pope Leo XIII, he enunciated this principle called subsidiarity. And he said everything that could be done locally should be done locally, because it'll engage people, people actually feel they've got a stake in it. When I first got elected onto the council in the middle of the last century, we did housing, we did schools, social services, cemeteries, parks, we did the lot. That's disappeared bit by bit, mostly because we are the most centralised country in Europe at the present time. Now, the problem is subsidiarity is something everybody agrees with in principle, but in reality, what we're faced with is the hospital pass. Because what's happened here is, Jeremy said, you can raise the council tax by 5%. That puts councils, don't forget, with councils like Northamptonshire, Kent, Somerset, bankrupt. What on earth can they do when they say we either put the council tax up by 5% and get absolutely royally rogered at the next election, or we don't put it up and get this, the same result? So it's very, very difficult. As you say, it's in principle, everybody's in favour of it. But let's talk about Ben Hoochin and Andy Street. There's people like Andy Burnham and Tracy Brabin and Steve Rotherham who are doing a damn fine job.
They are doing well.
I think London is a very, very different case. I think it's almost impossible. We've actually got a minister for London. We haven't got a minister for Liverpool. We haven't got a minister, for the West Midlands. And I think that the Windsor report has shown up some of the problems, one of the difficulties, one of the breakage points we've got in London at the present time.
Now, Keith, I know you were at the meeting with this report, so give us a brief detail of what it was about and what happened as a result.
Well, the report was done by Sir Tom Windsor, and that was a report on what took place during the dismissal, if you like, or the resignation of the commissioner.
Forced resignation.
And, well, indeed, and that was the conclusion that he actually said it was tantamount to pushing her out. Constructive dismissal was the term that he used. It was tantamount to that. And he was not very complimentary when at the end of the session I asked him, did he feel that the Mayor had acted appropriately and correctly? And I actually made a note of some of the points he made, which was he said he felt, this is Tom Windsor's words, not mine, that he thought it was an abuse of power, it was a political ambush, the shortcutted process, it was preemanated the statutory premeditated the statutory process contrary to law, and he was really very...
What happens to Sadiq Khan then as a result of that then? Because can he just sit around and carry on with his job?
Well, that's the interesting thing. This report has gone to the Home Secretary, so it's for her to make a decision as to what she wants to do. He's made 9 recommendations, so she may adopt some of the recommendations so that this can't really happen again. But of course she could also refer it to, because he is the de facto commissioner for police, she could also refer it to the IOPC to investigate.
She wasn't very good though, was she? Let's be honest.
Well, I think the thing in politics, it's always easier to find a scapegoat than it is to find a solution.
It's true.
And what happened was, after the Sarah Everard case, the Wayne Couzens visit, something had to be seen to be done. And I think this is where the poor politics came in. A proper courageous leader would have said, look, we've got a systemic problem here. It's actually within the police force. It's an institutional issue here, going right back to Macpherson, if you like. We've got these issues, these problems. And some of the email traffic that's coming out at the moment is just disgusting. To sack Cressida Dick, who was actually doing a decent job. Was
she doing a good job?
Well, that's a matter of opinion.
What do you think?
For him, the straw that broke the camel's back was the Hutton report, the report on the 14 officers who were accused of a lot of social media stuff. And because they didn't all get sacked, some were actually exonerated. He was allegedly, according to the report, Tom's report, he demanded that she sack a lot of them, irrespective of that. She, in the report,
so that is what kind of triggered it.
Yeah.
So in light of all of that, then, I mean, Stephen, what do you think then? Is Jeremy Hunt's idea of having all these regional mayors and stuff like that another layer?
There isn't an idea there. What he said, we'll look at Suffolk, Norfolk and parts of the North East outside there. Thanks a lot. Let's have a bit of detail about that. Look, this is absolutely worthless and meaningless and completely redundant unless the money follows the policy at the present time. Now, I have to say, I'm very much in agreement with you that there are certain strategic overviews that have to be done nationally. You can't have one council having the death penalty and the other not, or whatever.
They should all have it.
No, of course you shouldn't. but unfortunately, he's promised something, but he's not actually put his money where his mouth is.
Well,
he's written cheques, but he ain't going to cash.
Well, he's taken cheques and the money's coming from us. Listen, Steve.
Not till April.
Yeah, well, not till April, yeah. Well, Stephen, thank you very much.
And I'm not a Tory.
No, you're not a Tory here. Well, I don't think anyone is anyway. They're not Tories. Stephen Pound,
I'm not a Tory.
Thank you.
Also, Keith Prince, thank you so much for joining me. Right, so what's your thought on that? Do you think it's a good idea? In response to the publication of Sir Tom Windsor's report, this is what the Mayor said. Londoners will be able to see that this review is clearly biased and ignores the facts. What happened was simple. I lost confidence in the former Commissioner's ability to make the changes needed, and she then chose to stand aside. Londoners elected me to hold the Met Commissioner to account, and that's exactly what I've done. I make absolutely no apology for demanding better for London and for putting the interests of the city I love first. So coming up, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? The country's top civil servant visited border force facilities in Dover amid the ongoing migrant crisis. That's as over 41,000 have reached British shores this year alone, raising questions over where to house them. And one owner of a luxury hotel in Kent rejected a £1.1 million government offer to house asylum seekers. Is it even possible to solve the crisis? That is on the way after the break.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
23 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Simon Case, the country's most senior civil servant, has paid a visit to border force facilities at Dover Harbour in Kent. The Cabinet Secretary was filmed disembarking from the border force vessel Hurricane at Dover today. Now, sources say that they understood it was a private visit where the head of the civil service would be able to gauge the efforts underway by border force and military personnel to deal with the surge in people crossing the channel in small boats. And this year alone, a staggering 41,000 migrants and counting made their way onto British shores. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the crisis? Our home editor, Mark White, has more on how certain hotel owners are handling the migrant crisis.
Tucked away in the East Kent countryside is a little gem of a hotel that's won awards for its service. It is the most unlikely candidate to become the latest hotel housing asylum seekers. Yet that's exactly what would have happened had they accepted a more than £1 million offer from a Home Office contractor. This is also a popular venue for weddings and other events. Owner Richard Martin says the impact on the community of handing over his hotel to the government would have been huge.
So this is our wedding and special events marquee right here.
It looks very impressive, I have to say, Richard. Well, when you come in here, you can just see actually how unsuitable this would be for an asylum seekers venue.
Entirely. This is used exclusively for our special events, mainly weddings, and we've hosted 2,500 in here since we created this space, and so for the asylum seekers that were intended to stay here, absolutely no purpose.
And it's a valuable asset for the people in this local area, as well as obviously an employer.
Of course, this space is known locally very well, and if you mention our name, the Blazing Donkey, locally, they'll just think weddings, and this is where it all takes place.
The Blazing Donkey has also been voted one of the top glamping sites in the UK. As absurd as it sounds, these luxury tents and huts would also have had to house asylum seekers if the hotel had accepted the Home Office contract. And it would have meant housekeeper Annie and more than 50 other staff here in peak season would have been out of a job.
But I don't think you would get the what do they call it, camaraderie that you would get here. We all sort of club in and it's really lovely.
Like many people, the hotel's director, Trevor Squire, lost his previous job during COVID. Going through all that again would, he says, have been unbearable.
For me, and also for another couple of staff, we live here. This is our home. This isn't just our job. This is my home, and I see it as my home. And, you know, I'm not a young man, so it would have been terrifying.
With more than 42,000 people having crossed the channel in small boats so far this year, the pressure on authorities trying to find them suitable accommodation is intense. But this luxury country hotel is surely not what the immigration minister meant when he said Channel migrants should be housed in basic accommodation. Mark White, GB News in East Kent.
Well, that's a beautiful venue. I don't think I can afford to go there. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Is there actually a will to do it? I'm joined now by Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme Director of Amnesty International UK, Stephen Valdez-Simmers. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. So I want to address the current migrant situation in the system. Why is the system simply not working?
The biggest reason, almost the overriding reason, is that government policy has created enormous backlogs in this system. So if you go back 4 years, the number of outstanding asylum claims was a little under 20,000 in respect of under 6 months waiting, and in respect of more than 6 month waiting was about 14,000. If you look now, the backlog has quadrupled overall, and those that are waiting more than 6 months, and in some instances much, much longer, that has increased sixfold. So you have a massive amount of claims that are not moving through the system. So people who are entitled to asylum not getting out of the system and getting on with their lives. People who may not be entitled to asylum are not getting decisions, so cannot be returned. Everyone is just backing up in the system. And that's why anyone coming in new is coming into a system that has collapsed. And we don't have a particularly increased number of people entering the system. It's true that more people come increasingly by boat than other means. And it is true that we have had more claims over the last 12 months than previously, but nothing like the sorts of numbers that I've just mentioned.
So in your view, how do we efficiently or effectively fix the system?
Well, there are two urgent things. Firstly, ministers have to acknowledge that their ridiculous decision to simply stop processing thousands of claims has not achieved anything useful for them or anybody else, and they have to reverse that. They have to get on with focusing on having a fair and efficient asylum system that deals with the claims it receives. But it's also true, obviously, that now that the system has completely broken down, there is going to need to be an enormous amount of resource, at least initially put to the system, to be able to determine these claims and, of course, continue to accommodate the people who the claims belong to until such time as the system can be got back into some sort of state of repair.
Well, stay right there, Stephen, because I'm also joined by former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben, thank you very much for joining me. Listen, what Stephen's saying sounds perfectly logical to me. The system, it doesn't sound like there are that many more people coming. There just seems to be some odd situation with the processing. What do we need to be focusing on to handle this crisis? I mean, isn't Stephen making some very valid points there?
Well, I mean, Stephen and indeed the programme so far has discussed
the illegal crossings of the Channel purely through the prism of deportations. What no one seems to talk about, and no one's prepared to talk about, is the fact that border control is not equivalent to a deportation program. Indeed, a deportation program only kicks in after border control has failed. The point is we have non-existent border control in the Channel. Border Force are not deterring and pushing these illegal crossings, the boats that are coming, bringing these people illegally into our waters. They're not pushing them back into French waters. They're not providing any deterrence. There's no physical, robust position being taken by our Navy and Border Force. They're just acting as a taxi service to bring these people from French waters. Indeed, there have been handing overs of these people by the French Navy to the British Navy, and then they're escorted, effectively on at the taxpayers' expense on these fantastic boats that we have back to our shores. Far from deterring these people from making this dangerous illegal crossing, we're actually encouraging them by showing them what fantastic comfort they will get once they enter our waters. And if they make it to our shores, then, as you identified earlier, they get fantastic accommodation, they get free healthcare, free dental care, they even get given cash. Unless and until we're prepared to have a robust approach at our border, which is what Border Force is employed to do, we will not solve this problem. But it is eminently solvable. I completely disagree with Rishi Sunak when he says there's no silver bullet or overnight solution to this. It is eminently resolvable overnight. It requires Border Force and the Royal Navy to do its job.
Well, listen, I want to bring Steve Valder-Simmons in there because Stephen is talking about the fact that actually we're not processing them quickly enough or doing the proper work that we should be doing processing it. But Ben, you've gone back to the start of it and saying that actually the Border Force are acting more like a taxi service. What would your response to that be, Stephen?
Well, the sad truth is that the last 4 years have been all about reacting to exactly the sorts of things that Ben has said, in trying to increase deterrence and policing and punishment of people in the hope that somehow the people who do seek asylum in the UK will go away, and they don't. And the reason
we haven't done any of that, Stephen. Can you give an example?
The reason they don't go away is nothing to do with our asylum system being any more attractive than anybody else's. And as anyone can see at this moment in time, its complete state of disrepair is awfully treating lots and lots of people. I mean, by the way, over the last couple of years, the number of people who've died in our asylum system has rocketed, including the number of babies who've died in our asylum system has gone up.
But Stephen, there are some
things that are happening in our system.
I'm afraid Stephen's
you did see that
on
nice
red
hotel.
herring.
Sorry, Ben.
Which is not being used, by the way. I'm not saying it should be, but let's not pretend that it's in use in our system. It's not.
But there are others kind of like it. Ben?
Well, I'm afraid Stephen is seeing this, again, through the whole prism of what you do with these people once they're here. They shouldn't get to the UK in the first place. But since we're discussing deportation, let's be very clear. We do not need to ditch the European Convention of Human Rights in order to deport these people. What we need to do is make it clear in British law that if you enter the country having crossed into it illegally, which these people have done, and if you've come from a safe country, which France is, you will be deported without any recourse to any judicial hearing. And it's as simple as that. Even the deportation program can be made to work.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and also Stephen Valder-Simmons. He's a Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme Director for Amnesty International UK. Thank you both for joining me. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
It's 5:34. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the government of locking the country into an economic doom loop. The comments follow the Chancellor's autumn statement yesterday. Meanwhile, the Institute for Fiscal Studies is warning the fall in living standards will be the largest since records began. Jeremy Hunt has defended his plans as the right thing to do. A sexual predator has admitted to the murder of law graduate Zara Alina, who was brutally kicked and stamped on, then left for dead. Georgia McSweeney's also admitted to sexually assaulting the law graduate as she walked home from a night out in East London last summer. The 35-year-old from Dagenham was found by passers-by with severe head injuries. She later died in hospital. Civil servants in the Home Office, Border Force, Department for Transport and DEFRA are to take industrial action in a dispute over pay. The PCS union has been calling for a 10% pay rise for its members, but this was rejected by the government. No dates have been announced yet, but it's thought the action will impact ports, borders and all areas of transport. The Royal Air Force says it's found unacceptable behaviour in the Red Arrows after allegations of sexual assault, bullying and misogyny. The force said the investigation had found no criminal activity, but disciplinary action had been taken, including dismissals. It's thought more than 40 members of staff were given evidence to the inquiry. The team has since received training in unacceptable behaviour. The Football Supporters Association has criticised Qatar over its late U-turn on alcohol. FIFA announced that beer will not be sold at the Islamic countries' World Cup stadiums just 2 days before the tournament kicks off. Fans had previously been told they would be allowed to drink alcohol within ticketed perimeter of each match venue. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Nana. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1890 and €1.1497. The price of gold is £1,474 and 83 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,385 points.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Simon Case, the country's most senior civil servant, paid a visit to Border Force facilities at Dover Harbour in Kent. He was filmed disembarking from the Border Force vessel Hurricane at Dover earlier today. Now, sources say that they understood that it was a private visit where the head of the civil service would have been able to gauge the efforts underway by Border Force and military personnel to deal with the surge in people crossing the channel in small boats. Now, this all feels a bit like a little too late. But is there actually the will to fix the problem? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Christine Hamilton and, of course, Danny Kelly. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Christine. Do you feel that there is actually a will to solve the problem?
Well, if the government don't get a grip of this, they are toast. They're probably toast anyway. But it is two huge issues people are worried about. One is the economy and how that affects them, and the other is the migrant crisis. And, you know, we need migrants. Of course we do. We are not producing enough of our own babies. We're not reproducing. So we need migrants. But we don't need economic migrants, and we don't need illegal asylum seekers. Ben Habib is absolutely right. We should be stopping them at the border. And the whole thing has just got so out of control. It is almost unbelievable that it has been allowed to get this state, and the amount of money we're spending. I mean, that wonderful fellow, what was it called? The Blasted Donkey?
Flaming Donkey.
Flaming Donkey, the Blasted Donkey.
That's your nickname, by the way, behind the scenes here.
I mean, good for him. And to turn down £1 million in the next year, because don't forget, with the economy turning down, he's going to have fewer weddings. He's going to have fewer. So he's made a very brave and principled decision. But, I mean, if the government doesn't get a grip of this, they are finished.
Well, it's almost laughable. I mean, that...
If it wasn't so serious...
If it wasn't so serious, you know, we'd all be laughing on our backs if somebody told you, oh, just go across to the UK and you can stay in that five-star hotel where all these weddings are. I mean, I don't get to stay in places like that ever.
Now they're proposing not just to take over a hotel for these...
They're going to pay them $1 million for
They're going to mix them up with normal guests. Well, I mean, that's...
No, sorry.
God forbid.
Well,
God forbid.
It's not even... It's not against the people itself. It's the principle of it and the fact that it is not a deterrent, Danny.
OK, to answer your question directly, it's my belief that unless you saturate 70 miles of French coastline with heavily armed police or soldiers who are going to pop the dinghies, I don't think it is possible. Ben Habib, let me just...
Turn them round when they get here and send them back.
Yeah, but all they're going to do is launch themselves into the drink.
Turn them round again.
Yeah, but they're going to launch themselves into the drink. That's what they will do. That's what they'll be told to do. And you're right. Imagine an Albanian TikTok drug dealer in a jacuzzi at this flaming donkey place.
Well, you think I'd want to say how ridiculous, but actually they're putting they're advertising on TikTok how to get across.
So Danny, you're saying we can't do anything about it. We just have to let them come here.
No, I'm not. That's the opposite. I've said saturate 70 miles of coastline with police and bayonets and popping the dinghies. The pro-immigration guy was wrong. He claimed that Britain isn't any more attractive to asylum seekers than anywhere else. If that's the case, why do they travel from North Africa or Iraq and Iran to Greece, through Italy, through France? You know, that's baloney.
I think it's very attractive, actually, especially with Jeremy Hunt's new budget that's supposedly helping the people who have nothing, which it does actually do what it says on the tin, but ultimately it doesn't help. And those are the kind of people who will be in that predicament when they come here initially.
Well, we're clearly more attractive than Iraq and Iran, but why are we more attractive, apart from the fact that English is the language, why are we more attractive than France or any other European country? We shouldn't be, but we are because of all these handouts. I mean, the amount of money these people get. They get phones, they get this...
No, they don't get phones. They don't get phones.
Oh, yes, they do.
No, they don't get phones. No, they don't.
We'll find out the definitive. Somebody
they don't get a phone. Some people say they get cars. That's baloney as well.
No, I haven't heard cars.
They apparently get £30 or something.
They get 38 quid a week.
But you see, listen, 38...
Which is a round of drinks in London.
No, but hang on.
They get board and lodging.
Yeah.
True.
They get board and lodging.
They don't get phones or top-of-the-range night trainers or anything.
Well, nobody said night trainers. But listen, she said about phones. I don't know the answer to that. We'll find out the definitive. But that's not the point. When you come here, your bed and board are paid for. You get food and things like that. That's what's expensive. Electricity, the cost of living.
Yeah, you're kept warm in the winter.
That is what we're talking about. We've got our own sort of military personnel, ex-servicemen. We've got our own homeless people to deal with. They're not being put out in hotels.
This is highlighted.
The government are not paying for them.
Nana,
either.
This
So
is
it's totally
highlighted
out of order.
a massive
Totally
discrepancy.
out of order.
But you mustn't forget that a lot of homeless people living on the streets...
They want to be there.
That's their choice because they're suffering through terrible PTSD
Yes,
and
but
things.
that might be the case. But there should
not
be
all
something. There should
I
be
didn't say all.
But we
I
said
said a lot of them.
Yeah, but that might be the case of some. But there are a lot of people slipping through the net. And it's not just those. It's the people who are living in sheltered accommodation. It's the people who are living in council accommodation. Those people, you know, there's so many other people that we could be helping in this manner. That the fact that we're prepared, the government are prepared to spend millions housing people in hotels, 5-star hotels.
I know.
Absurd.
And when we've got our own people queuing up at food banks.
Ben Habib, who I find a lot of common ground with, I disagree with him when he says just turn them round, because you're using the Australian model. Nigel Farage is always going on about the Australian model, turn them round and things like that. But you must
stop them coming.
Yeah, no. Well, apparently they were towed to another country. I don't know. But the big difference there is
Australia. Yeah.
The big difference here is the quality of the boats, the sturdiness of the boats. You can turn round a wooden boat without anyone, you know, through the fragility of the structure, falling off the boat. And also, now this may sound trivial, but a reason that people didn't throw themselves in the drink in Australia was because of sharks.
No, it's not. It's very foolish. But
because of sharks.
Maybe we should put some sharks in there then. That just, I'm joking. I'm joking.
We need to stop them leaving the French shore in the first place. We've sent another.
Deflect to me.
It's your fault. You shouldn't say that.
Lineker will be on to you again.
Oh gosh, here we go again.
We've sent another ton of money to
Elon
France.
Musk will stop him though.
Sorry, you're on another.
The blazing donkey is in full flow.
Blasted donkey, yes. No, sorry, you're talking about Twitter.
No, but
we've sent another ton of money to France, haven't we, on top of the money we'd already had, something like 220 million. Let's see what comes of that. Are the French just going to trouser it?
But even, Stephen Valder-Simmons alluded to the fact that he didn't think it was right for the first 4-star, 5-star hotels. So he's not really supporting that concept either.
Don't get hung up on 5 stars.
No, I will.
I don't think there's a 5-star hotel
or 4
housing
or 5.
migrants.
No. This wonderful. Did you not see that?
4-star? No, that's not 5-star.
I just said 4 or 5.
I don't think there's a 5-star. Name me one 5-star hotel.
I said 4 or 5.
I know, but there's not a 5-star.
Well, I'm saying it's either a 4 or a 5-star.
But it's not. It's not 5-star.
There might be others, though. You don't
know that.
But you don't know.
But I'm not claiming it, though.
I'm not claiming it. I'm saying it's either or.
What? That's a claim.
No, it's not.
Oh, come on, you two. You're arguing over... You're bald men fighting over a comb.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Semantics. Come on.
Why do you have to bring in my hair?
Fighting over a comb.
They are being put up in hotels that most
luxury
people in
hotels.
This country... Let's call them luxury.
Well, let's call it that. Are you happy with that?
Then, yeah.
You happy with that?
I'm happy with luxury hotels.
All right,
stop nitpicking.
He hasn't got any hair. He hasn't got any hair. He can't get nits. He hasn't got any hair.
Hey, the hotel I got married in, which usually sold weddings for 20, 25, 30 grand, now houses asylum seekers.
Yeah, it's not on, really, seriously. OK, so we've got the situation. Do you believe there is a will actually to solve the problem? Because I don't feel there is.
I don't feel there is. And the other side of this coin is, I mean, take the Albanian situation. Albania needs these young men. Albania is being deprived of young, economically viable workforce, all the young men disappearing. That's to the detriment of that country. They should be staying over there. Maybe they come over here if they're genuine and train as a doctor or whatever and then go back. But we're draining countries like that of all their young, healthy chaps.
I'm just going to say briefly, though, you did say what is the draw to this country? And obviously, apart from the luxury hotels, which are either 4 or 5 star, I know this, either or, let's not get stuck on that. The other thing is that we actually accept a larger percentage of people who try and claim asylum in this country as opposed to the others. Right, this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4. Let's start with Dr. Seshni Mudlia from Milton Keynes. Seshni, what do you think about this, then, this whole situation?
Good evening, Nana. Thank you for having me and lovely to see you. It's such an interesting discussion. It is a crisis, but we do need to do something about this migrant crisis. There are many ways we can reduce the backlog at the borders. We can review the applications at different places. For example, like in France, they can review the applications of the asylum seekers. We need to provide safer routes as opposed to the boats and what can happen to these asylum seekers. We also need to investigate the gangs and the trafficking, and leaders need to meet as well, Nana, to discuss this so that we can reduce the migrants that are coming over.
OK, thank you for that, Seshni. Let's go to Julie Forties. She's there in Bedfordshire. Julie, what do you think about all of this? What's your view, especially that lovely luxury hotel?
I'm not getting on the debate of 4- and 5-star hotels. I'm not getting involved in that.
Yes.
I do agree with Danny, and I agree with what Ben said. It's going back to the source of the problem, and that is the border control. But obviously, listening to the news article that we had on earlier, that the civil servants, border control, are just looking to go on strike because they are arguing about pay. They're not really even doing their job, so why should we be paying them to do a job? But that's a different topic. For me, I don't think it's going to be a quick fix situation, but I think we need to go back and really look at these people getting into British waters in the first place. Sending all this money to France, that's great, but they need to be doing their job in France, and our border control and the Navy need to be out there actually getting the job done and stopping people getting into British waters in the first place.
Thank you very much for that. Alan McNeely, he's there in Grimsby. Alan, what's your view? Is it possible to solve this crisis?
Good afternoon. I agree with what Ben Habib said. We should be turning them round if they turn up on our shores. There's nothing to stop us photographing them, fingerprinting them, documenting them, and putting them straight back on a ferry to France if they've entered illegally. In terms of the accommodation, which is really the big bind that's getting everyone up in arms, we've got lovely land up at Scarborough Flow. We could quite easily build a nice place to keep them all till we've security cleared them and they're not a threat to us. To keep them up there out of the way, but there needs to be some control over them. The amount that are coming in, the fact that we know nothing about them, they pose a serious threat to the country.
That's true. Very true.
We can't just let them go roaming the streets because we've no idea who these people are.
Thank you very much for that, Alan. Let's go to David Barham. He's there in Watford. David.
Hello, Nana. Hello, everybody. Right, very simple. Everyone's looking at this the wrong way. We've discovered this that TikTok is being used by the traffickers to entice people to come. So why doesn't the British government do two things? First of all, stop the opposition to flights to Rwanda so that anyone's an illegal immigrant, not migrant, an illegal immigrant is basically shoved on a plane to Rwanda and then a film is put out on TikTok continually. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to come to the UK and are an illegal immigrant, you will be ending up in Rwanda.
And then, so you're saying they should post a TikTok video of somebody's flight taking off to... Yeah, that, you know what? It's an interesting concept, but no flights have taken off, sadly, so it'll be...
The opposition won't let it happen, so break the opposition and say, we're taking them out. End of.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. Seshni in Milton Keynes, Julie in Bedfordshire, Alan in Grimsby, and David, thank you so much to you in Watford. Right, now today I've been asking, is it even possible to solve the migrant crisis? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Carol says, we can if the government gets tough, ignore courts that hate us and get the illegals out any way we can. Anne says there is no political will to solve the illegal immigrant problem despite having nowhere to put them. So your thoughts coming thick and fast. Now, though, it's time for our quick fire debates, a part of the show where we discuss some of the other stories making the headlines. Joining me today, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also journalist, broadcaster and entrepreneur Danny Kelly. Right, let's kick off with this story. A town in Cornwall was not too happy after B&Q named one of their toilets after their town. Everyone can now buy a Bodmin toilet, and this is not an uncommon occurrence. One was also named after the town Falmouth. Or Falmouth.
Falmouth. Falmouth would have been more appropriate.
Yes, that's right. No.
Oh, sorry.
So what would you be upset? Would you be upset if a toilet was named after you?
When
Danny?
Thomas Crapper invented the humble toilet all those years ago.
loo.
And that was Crapper, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Crapper.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Would I be offended if a toilet was named after my place
Kelly.
of birth? The Liverpool Bog? No, I wouldn't.
What
no.
about you, Christine? Would you be...
No. Somebody did actually name a loo after me. I'm trying to remember where it was. Somebody had a sort of start... Well, it was... I didn't know this story was coming up, or I'd have double-checked my facts, but somebody did once, and why not? My name was on the door. It was some hotel. You go into hotels, and there were people on... Yeah, but some of the other... There was a Whoopi Goldberg.
In a hotel? All the asylum seekers have used your
Was it 4 or 5 stars?
In a 5-star hotel?
Right,
luxury.
Right, our next story is about the ongoing... Do you know something was named after me? There's some sanitary towels called Nana. Actually, they were.
Really? What, named after you?
You're called Nana.
Nana Akua sanitary
No, not
towel?
Nana Akua, just Nana. Right, so with this ongoing mass exodus on Twitter, the staff are leaving in their droves. Numerous Twitter offices are shut down and hundreds of staff quit due to Elon Musk's new hardcore working culture, including long hours at high intensity. This is one of many changes since the billionaire took charge of the social media site. So what do you think, Christine? Elon Musk getting rid of everybody, saying if you're not prepared to work hardcore, you've got 3 months, you can sling your hook.
Well, he can do what he likes. He owns the company. I hope he will shake it up. At the moment, I think their exclusion is too draconian and it's too woke, etc., etc. So I'd like to see a lot of the people who are excluded back on there. Of course, it's got to be moderated to a certain extent. It's his company.
Yeah,
you know, he can do what he likes.
The world would be a better place without the cesspit that is Twitter. You two, of course, have got your blue ticks to protect. I've never been on it. I hate the thing.
Well, listen.
Well, I didn't ask for a blue tick. I don't know why I've got one. I quite like having it, but I'm certainly not going to pay for it.
Awful thing.
Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, does this autumn statement benefit you? According to our Twitter poll, 13% of you say you're benefiting and 87% of you say no. I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel, broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly for joining me today. Next up, it's Dubes, Michelle Dubes with Dubes & Co. Michelle, what is coming up on the show?
Hello, Nana. Yeah, I want to talk about ultimate accountability and where the line should be drawn. This is after the 2-year-old little boy died in a house that was filled with mould. Where should the buck stop when it comes to cases like this? And vaccine passports, leaders at the G20, they seem to be giving the thumbs up to a centralised database to look at who's been tested, who's been jabbed, so that we can all freely move around. I do not like the sound of that. I want to talk about Qatar as well. You can't drink alcohol. I laugh because I actually found it quite amusing. However, many people do not. Many people are absolutely furious. And long-term sick, 2.5 million people saying that they're too ill to work. Are we setting the bar too low in terms of what constitutes a sickness that means basically that's it, you're out of the world of work?
Well, listen, Michelle, thank you so much for that. Looking forward to that. That is on Dubes & Co. later on after this show. Thank you to you for all your company. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 4. I'll leave you with the weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The rain in eastern Scotland is finally easing, but it's staying damp here for the rest of the day. Clear spells elsewhere, and as a result, a chilly night to come. We've got low pressure still close to the northeast of Scotland, and that's still bringing some wet weather, but the rain is easing as an area of high pressure starts to move in from the west. That's bringing clear spells already for Northern Ireland, much of Wales and the south of England. Further showers coming in for a time overnight, but even these become confined to the coast and ease later. The rain less heavy, less persistent across Scotland, although still some damp weather about, and some outbreaks of light rain returning to the east of England overnight as well, staying frost-free in the north and the east. But for southwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest, a touch of frost first thing. Northern Ireland, the coldest spot, -2, -3 Celsius in places, and some dense fog patches first thing. They'll be slow to clear, and it'll be cold where those fog patches persist. Otherwise, bright skies for the western half of the UK, cloudier conditions in the east, but the rain tending to be light and on and off, nowhere near as heavy and persistent as it's been in places. A coldish afternoon compared to what we've seen recently, 11 or 12 Celsius in the south, 8 or 9 in the north. But for many, it's bright skies and largely dry until the evening when some heavy and persistent rain pushes into Northern Ireland, reaching western Scotland, Wales and the southwest by midnight. That sweeps across the country, accompanied by coastal gales around parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's replaced by showers. And it's a milder night because of the breeze and the rain, but cold enough for some flakes of snow over the Scottish mountains, perhaps the Pennines as well, above around 400 or 500 metres. The rain pushes into the North Sea, blustery showers follow, some heavy downpours in the west, and that's how it looks on Sunday, a day of sunny spells, but also some of these lively downpours, a gusty breeze, and Monday, Tuesday sees more unsettled weather.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention.